If you have an organization that people are proud, oh, I put 60 hours, 80 hours, you have a burnout culture almost for sure. It's just a question of time to start to see the turnover rise.
Anna, thank you so much for joining me for the Let's Talk Business podcast.
It's wonderful to be here.
So today's topic is, I think we have spoken once or twice on the topic, but I think it's on the mind of every entrepreneur, every leader at one point in their career, in their lifespan, which is the topic of burnout. So I'm very happy we have you on the show, and there's a lot of questions I have prepared. So hopefully we'll see how fast time flies in this episode. So thank you so much for joining me. I guess I'll start off with, since people don't know you, just give us a little bit of brief understanding of how you got to be an expert in the burnout topic.
So my background is psychology. I have a Ph.D. in psychology, and I was in academia about 20 years ago. And in the last 10 years, I've been working as a business coach with loads of business owners. So that is always my frame of reference, is trying to understand the human being, why we behave in the way that we behave, and even in terms of marketing and business development. And I really have this belief there is so much evidence to put it out there that we can make a bigger impact if we avoid and we prevent burnout, if we take care of ourselves and the people that work for us and our customers and everybody involved. So I'm really in this mission to try to help individuals and organizations to how can we do our mission as businesses that we have, that is the profits, but also the people involved. And I will also throw in the planet there, taking care of the planet. That is the only one that we have to live. And how can we do this in a way that is a win-win for everybody?
Got it. So I want to start with the fundamental question about burnout. So burnout is something that I find in the business community, not from a psychology perspective, but just more in the habits or in the conversation, which became like a very catch-all phrase.
Yes.
Rather than a technical term that means something specific, we open up a conversation, oh, I feel burnout. And sometimes it's very confusing to draw the line. What is burnout versus what is just stress? And, yesterday was a great day. You didn't have burnout. All of a sudden today you have some stress and you're questioning everything you're doing. So could you shed some light as far as the overall difference between stress and burnout, and what are the symptoms? And then we'll go into even deeper.
Yeah, and you are totally right. Burnout has become this catch-all phrase or word that people just throw it around like it's the fashion word nowadays. And I think that happens because there is really, truly burnout, but I think we are in a burnout culture, and using that word as a catchphrase is a reflection of it, but then becomes a disservice because we don't know what is really burnout from other things like you're saying, stress, a bad day, and so forth. So in psychology, since the 1970s, burnout is being something that has been studied. So we have more, if in the 70s, we are speaking 40, 50 years of research behind burnout. And the World Health Organization has a very specific definition of burnout that is seeing 3 dimensions enter into play in the workforce that creates in the individual the sense of exhaustion. Physically, emotionally, people feel totally drained. And then there is another dimension that they call it cynicism. They feel disconnected from their purpose. Why bother? Why doing this? And then a third dimension of a feeling of lack of efficiency, professional efficiency. So technically, burnout happens when people are exhausted, totally disconnected to the point of being cynical, and feeling lack of efficiency. But in practice, we want to prevent this to happen because it takes time to recover of being fully burned out. And it's really important to see that most people are in a continuum and not totally burnout. This makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you define the part of like when somebody could be totally not in the burnout zone and still have stress
Yes.
while be fully burnt out and not even have stress? It's a totally different symptom based on what you're
Yes,
saying.
correct.
Okay.
Uh, So I think it's better to see this as, and we have instruments, we can assess this very easily. In a 10-minute survey, we can have a feeling where people, so you have, imagine you have a company with 50 people and the people are speaking about burnout and some people are even doing some sick leave and your turnover numbers are getting a little bit worrisome. You can, in 10 minutes, do a survey and then know where everybody, or you say, have like a snapshot of where everybody, maybe you have like 10% burnout, but
Mhm.
most of the people, I will bet, will be in the overextended profile, the disengaged profile, and the percentage in the engaged. So people are in this, see this as a continuum. So if I describe the burned out as the lower extreme, in the other extreme of these will be people in the engaged profile. That is where we want to have most of our workforce. They are productive, they are on purpose with their own values and the values of the company. There is where we want to have in that full engagement, on their optimal engagement, where we want to have most people. But the reality is that people are not all there, and you will have the overextended. That the overextended is like people that they are still on purpose, but they are exhausted. So they have one of the elements of burnout, but they are still on purpose. But if we don't take care of them, they will eventually burn out. It's a little bit like, and many leaders are in this position. They are totally connected with their purpose, but they are so pushing, drilling. That is a little bit like that image of the frog in the pot with boiling water. They don't realize that water is increasing in temperature, going higher and higher, and suddenly they wake up one day that is not just one bad day. They feel, I cannot do this anymore.
Mhm.
And we
Uh,
want to avoid this.
yeah. So an interesting thing that I've realized that, the tendency of people would say that, burnout is something that somebody is not successful. And therefore, the lack of success is turning them into a burnout on what they're doing. Interestingly enough, that I've found leaders that maybe be very successful, even over successful, and they also achieve the same level of burnout. What could you share on that?
Yeah, because that has to do with the causes of burnout. So let me just conclude one thought and then let's go there, because it's
Sure,
the root causes of burnout.
sure.
So I spoke about, if we see this, the burnout as a continuum. In the two extremes, we have burned out. In the other extreme, we have the engage of the optimal engagement. Then I was describing the overextended profile, that we have to pay a lot of attention to it.
Mhm.
And then there is another profile that we have also to put a light on, that is the disengaged profile. That is somebody that still can be productive. They are not exhausted. They have the energy, but they are disconnected. They are cynical. So why bother? Think about the quiet quitting. But if we know how many people we have in these different kinds, think about a matrix with 4 quadrants. If we know where people, the percentage of people in each of these quadrants, then we can do something about to bring, for instance, more of the engaged, more of the disengaged people will relieve the workload of the overextended and bring
Mhm.
more people to the engaged. That is always the goal. And what you are referring to that I think is very important is burnout is a symptom or something that we see in an individual level. The person gets burnout, but usually is the result of some dynamics that are in the background. The root causes are in the background. And yes, one of the root causes can be the lack of success in the terms of I don't have control over the situation. I'm not getting the reward that I want from this. And that can be one of the root causes of burnout, but it's just one of. For many people, mainly for leaders, the main root cause of burnout is the workload. They have more on their plate that is humanly possible to deal with, and maybe they are struggling with delegation of that to their teams.
So you're saying that, just to make sure that I got this correctly, so burnout is something that the individual feels, but the root cause of it could be something external that's
Correct.
actually okay. So let me ask you this. So could a person have a personal challenges that will cause a burnout in what they
Yes.
do in the business?
Oh, yes. Odyssey, if you think about so many demands, but imagine that you have somebody on your family that is sick and that is demanding a lot of your time and effort. You have less capacity to put on your work, or you are spending nights without sleeping because you are worried about stuff. All of that takes a toll, and we should take that in consideration.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Okay, now is burnout something that obviously this is what you do is help people with burnout, but is burnout something that could be basically, felt in the earlier stages prior to a full blown burnout?
And that is my mission. I think in organizations, we should be focused on burnout prevention. Okay.
Got it.
That I think, and there is a ton that we can do to prevent the full burnout. And one of the things is assessing where people are. It's like if you are driving, if your business is a car, and imagine that in the dashboard, you only have the speedometer,
Hmm.
you need more information than that. You need to be able to have some indications to see if things are the engine is starting to overheat. You need to have that information. You need to know what is the gas in your car, if you have enough for the next trip that you are going to make. So there we have the instruments to assess where people are in these 4 quadrants. So that gives you a picture. It's like able, again, with the car, to look under the hood of the car and see what is really happening and do something about before you see the car exploding, so to speak, in smokes and stop. So there is a ton that you can do to assess and even to know what are the root causes. It's just a workload problem. Is people feeling that there is a lack of fairness in the workplace, a misalignment in values, not having a sense of community, and not feeling the rewards are fair. So there is a ton of dynamics that we can have an idea, and then we can do things to intervene on them. And
Hmm.
also just realizing about the cost of burnout, because mainly when we are speaking about companies that are growing very fast, sometimes, so they say, imagine a company that you start the core team, you're 4 or 5 people in the beginning, and things are going really well, and you start to add staff. And maybe you are not even measuring your turnover rate. And that is really important to know. Of course, turnover is not just because of burnout, but it's an indication, something that a company should know their percentage of turnover and how it matches with the industry average and so forth. So there is a ton when we have the information. So first is be able to have the information to know what to look, to design a dashboard that is really meaningful. And then there are simple things that can have an incredible impact in preventing burnout.
Hmm. So what would you say are the key symptoms, let's say as a leader, if they start seeing to say, this might be a beginning of a burnout with an employee?
The number of hours that people are working, that gives, and of course, there is a launch, there is a big thing. Oh, everybody can push in a certain direction, and we want to have a team that really puts their all in the launch. But if you cannot expect that that will be their new normal, because eventually they will burn out. So it's okay to
Yeah.
push for a certain amount of time. It's like a competitive. You are preparing to a competition. There is the game day or the
Hmm.
game season. You want to go there with all the force, but then give space for people to recover.
Got it.
So if you have an organization that people are proud, oh, I put 60 hours, 80 hours, you have a burnout culture almost for sure. It's just a question of time to start to see the turnover rise. And of course, if it's easy to bring more people in, if you are in an economical situation or an industry that is easy to bring new blood in, maybe
Mhm.
it's not a big problem. But I think we are not. I think people are realizing that is better for the business and to the growth of the business to keep the good people in the team and creating the work conditions for them to stay there at long term.
Mhm. So let me ask you the same question a little different, which is sometimes a employer would have a great employee and they start seeing a slacking in productivity. And sometimes you don't know what it is. Is it a burnout? Is it just a person lost interest in the business in general? Or maybe they have something going on in their personal life? What are the advice you would give a leader how to approach that in the right way that it should do more good than harm?
Yeah, and of course there is the basic things that keeping the communications open between and trying to see what is going on in the person lives. That is always a manager, making sure that you are training your managers to be able to have those conversations. All those things are important, but sometimes really is important to bring somebody from the outside because even if you are already a company that has an HR department and the HR should be aware and creating these avenues of communication and all of that, but even when you have an HR department, if you can bring once in a while somebody from the outside allows your workforce to be a little bit more honest and not be afraid of, oh, if I admit this, what will happen to my career? Or I don't feel so. It's like many times you can have the more efficient, even in a family, you can have somebody in the family that is a doctor and they know their stuff. But if we heard the same information from an outsider doctor, we are going to take it with a different angle and pay more attention probably to that. So that is one of the things that we have to create, of course, a culture within of open communication as much as possible, but also understanding that there will be always limits of that open communication
Sure.
internally. And in that case, an external element of a coach, of a consultant can be very helpful.
Got it. Now, let me ask you something else. Let's say somebody has developed a burnout, either an employee or the leader, business owner themselves. What is some of the practical advice you could give people listening to this that they could start easing the burnout or maybe even getting out of that burnout phase?
Yeah. And I really, really underline that the best strategy is preventing the burnout.
Sure.
So when things are starting, and the way that we define is that one of the questions in the questionnaire is in terms of frequency, a bad day is going to happen all the time, a day that you feel exhausted, a day that you feel disconnected.
Sure.
If it's once a month, okay, pay attention to it, see something that you can do. But when it starts to be once a week, and almost more days than not, that is a
Hmm.
big, big red flag. And give yourself some time. So give yourself some time to take a weekend off or even 3 days off and really create some time of reflection where you are if you are a leader and what you can be doing different. It's better to press the pause button and to take that 3 days off and put even a week leave and do something about it, preventing you to go to the full burnout than when you are in full burnout. Because usually when people really get in full burnout is when they just, they check out. They pass, okay, they say, I'm going out to start a new thing, or they present their resignation, and we want to avoid that in our key players. But if a person already is in that situation, it's absolutely possible to recover from burnout, but please ask for professional help for it because it really accelerates the recovery.
Let me ask also an overarching question on this topic based on your experience. So, burnout is something that usually gets developed over time. With, as you said, something
Yes.
something is happening externally or internally that's causing that. We live in a world with a very fast-paced world with social media and things happening so quickly. Have you seen, based on the research and based on the clients you work with, that burnout is happening sooner today's day and age than maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago?
Yes, the acceleration. And if we think about, how do you say, the COVID-19 was a great example in certain industries to see that in the healthcare was like all the conditions for burnout was there. Highly demand of their time. There were not enough people to rotate. They didn't knew exactly, they didn't have control over the circumstances. So was like the perfect conditions for burnout. And we are paying the price of it in terms of the number of health professionals that left the profession. And even knowing that takes time to recover from burnout, takes more time to train a doctor or a nurse than to
Yeah.
recover on burnout. So we also have to put that in perspective. But absolutely, we live in a society that the acceleration of change is here and is here to stay now with the artificial intelligence. So if we don't change the dynamics, we are going to see more burnout than less. It's a little bit, we were speaking a little bit before about the burnout being felt at the level of the individual. And one image that we use a lot when we speak about the burnout is like the canary in the coal mine. In the old times when they were in the coal mine, they will bring the little canary in there. This is really true. They had a little thing that they brought the canaries down, and when the canary flip or start not to behave normally, they knew that there were loads of toxic gases that were not healthy for people, and they will evacuate the mine. Somebody that really gets the full burnout is like this canary. You know that something is wrong. We can help the individual to be more resilient, absolutely, to develop self-leadership, self-mastery, be more productive, absolutely, but doesn't make logical sense to bring that more stronger canary back to a coal mine full of toxic fumes. We also have to create a better work environment.
Yeah.
So it's both things, taking care of the individual, but improving the system. So when we speak about the pathway that we can take more people from burnout to optimal engagement, yes, assessment, know where we are and have an idea of that, and it's easy to do and not expensive to do. Then, so consider A, B, C, practical things. A, assessment. You have to have the dashboard that you know where people are in that burnout engaged continuum and what are the root causes and how much is costing the company not doing something about the cost of inaction. Now that you have that picture, that assessment, you can do things. The B is a lot about boosting choice opportunities. It's a lot about self-development, leadership training, and helping people be more in a proactive than a reactive state. This, we can go back to Steve Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. At the core is about how can we help people to be more proactive than reactive, and there's a lot of self-development work there. But then the C is cultivate work sustainability. We speak a lot about environment sustainability, that as companies, we have to take care of it, of the planet, but we also have to be speaking about what is sustainable in terms of workloads, in terms of the pace of change, and how can we create a profitable business taking care of our workforce.
Got it. Got it. Let me ask you another question on this, which is, do you see a difference on the characteristic of a person who is more prone to get burnout versus other, or doesn't discriminate? Everybody.
Doesn't discriminate. Can be a question of time. I'll say without any doubt, a younger person has a little bit more leeway and resistant to pull all nights, to work more hours, and sometimes they don't have the responsibilities of the family that somebody in their 40s and 50s has. Absolutely, as we are young, we can push more our body. We will pay it later. Our body keep a score, but everybody, if all of us have limits.
Got it. Now, let's speak to the leaders that are listening to this. What are some very good habits a leader could start doing on a daily basis that will just help them on the prevention? We spoke so much about prevention,
Yeah.
just basic habits. We spoke about, the long hours or all-nighters. Other than that, what else could a person do for their health in order to make sure that they stay healthy and they control and not unfortunately fall into a burnout mode?
Yeah. So let me give you a couple of signs that they really, as a leader, they should pay a lot of attention to. For instance, if they always were very motivated, or in general are very motivated about what they do, and they start wake up in the morning and feel, oh my gosh, fighting with the snooze button, and what, feeling really things that they used to feel energized about doing now is a drag. That is a big sign that they themselves can be getting into the burnout thing. So I want to put that out there as one of the things that I see that is one of the signs that people have to pay attention. In terms of what they can do, a simple thing, and this I teach a lot in many of my speaking when I speak about this, I call it the PI method. So just three things, P-I-E, that you have to remember. P is for pause. All of us need to press the pause button. There are many types of pauses that we can do. We can do like going to a retreat, going to a conference. It's like a macro pause. That is great. But in our day-to-day, we are having to be able to do what I call scheduled pauses. So one thing that every leader should be doing is make sure that in their schedule, they have scheduled pauses in the morning to look to their day, at the end of the day to look back and look forward to the next day, and ideal also a reset pause in the middle of the day. Just that, creating that practice can make a huge difference. What you do in that pause a moment, depending of person to person. For some people can be the journaling, can be the planning, can be meditation. Combination of these is different from person to person, but creating that scheduled pause is like essential for our well-being. And that is what allows people to be ready to practice what I call the micro pauses, that is seeing the space between the stimulus and response that allow us to be proactive and not reactive. So P, start with the P for developing pauses. Pausing, essential, simple, even 1 minute. And if you tell me, I don't have 1 minute, big red flag, we have a problem. If you don't have a minute as a leader, you have a huge problem in front of you. It means that you are just reacting, and you are not, and if you are reacting, your workforce will be in the same, doing the same, and not good. Big alarm bell there. Then the I of the PI, so PI, the I is all about increasing our self-awareness. One of the core things of personal development, self-development, increase our self-awareness, accelerates everything. And understanding, just thinking very simple, yes, we can work our mindset. It's really, really important. But it's not, that alone is not enough. Okay? The mindset work alone is not enough. We have to work our thoughts, our beliefs, but that will have a reflection in the way that we feel and what we do in our day-to-day, and behave the way that we behave. So at least think about these three dimensions. Think the thoughts, our emotions and feelings, second dimension, and then our actions and behaviors, the third dimensions. And don't see these that, because some people are, okay, we change our thoughts, that will change our feelings, and we change what we do and the results we get. It's totally true. But for some people, it's easier to start with changing something that they are doing. So for instance, if you are stuck in a situation, you are banging your head against the wall, the best thing that you can do in that maybe is going out for a walk in nature, or walking around the block, just to move your body, and suddenly things start to fall into place and you start to understand and having a breakthrough. So don't see, I always like to use the image of a triangle, see the thoughts, the feelings, and the behaviors as three sides of a triangle. If you lose one of the sides, you cease to have a triangle. You need all the three sides. And for some people, it's easier to enter with their thinking and with their mindset, but some people are more connected with their feelings. So you start there. For some people, it's the doing. You start there and then ask yourself in terms of increasing your self-awareness, how this reflects in the other sides of the triangle. And just by doing this, you can increase usually your self-awareness. And then finally, the E of the pie. So P for pause, I for increasing the self-awareness, and the E is for embracing experimentation. Because anything that you decide doing are going sometimes to work very well, other times not work very well. But the thing about considered as an experiment is that even when it doesn't work, you have a lot of data to learn from. So there is no failure, it's just new information from learn from. And this is in anything of personal development that you do, self-development and professional development. You have to, if you embrace this experimentation mindset, you are much more resilient and able to learn from whatever is the program that you are doing.
Got it. Let me ask you a final question on this. Is there's a increasing level of awareness towards breath work?
Yes, I love
Have
it.
you seen a correlation, a connection between somebody doing breath work to help them with solve or prevent burnout?
Oh, yes. Breathwork is one of the easiest ways to start to do that, even for the pause, something to experiment with, because it can be very simple and very quickly. And being aware of our breath is one of the things we know that if our breathing rhythm is very quick, like 2 seconds in, 2 second inhalation and 2 seconds exhalation, that means that our body in a stress level. So just by observing another person breathe, you know if they are in stress mode or not. Just by looking to yourself and being self-aware of your own breathing, counting your breath in and out, you can know if you are in a stress state or not. So
Oh, wow.
think about the power of that. And if we spend all the day like that, we are going to pay the price. And just amplifying the exhalation and the inhalation, just that to more than 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, for 1 minute, we are resetting our bodies, the sympathetic, the parasympathetic, the stress system to the relaxed system in a simple way. We are resetting our body to be in a more relaxed state. And there are exercises that are very easy to learn that in 1 minute you can do the reset.
So you highly encourage people to do some level of breath work in order to use it for the pause, as you mentioned before, or even just general to clear their mind and have a more clear state of mind.
Absolutely. And if you think about most meditation methods, modes, mindfulness methods, they start with the breath.
Hmm.
Even if we think about the first breath, last breath, there is from the spiritual element to the practical element. If we are in a place with lots of toxic fumes, the first thing we cannot breathe here. We need to breathe, and we can learn to breathe better, and we can control is one of the keys to control our physiology is to learn how to breathe.
Wow, that's great. How could people find out more about what you do and a little bit
And
more about what you do?
And can I tell a tip for
Sure,
somebody that is in a stress situation, a very, very practical tip because
sure.
about the breathing? Because usually when we are very under stress in a very demand situation, and think about a leader going to a highly stressful meeting and he starts to get that very shallow breath at the top. One of the usual advice is, oh, breathe deep. And they try to breathe deep and they cannot do it. And they get even more stressed or more even panicky. I always tell people to imagine that their lungs is like a glass of water, a cup of water. And when we are breathing very shallow, the water, so literally our lungs have a lot of residual air within it. So we only have the capacity to breathe shallow at the top of our lungs. It's like if you have a glass of water, it's full of water. There is only very limited space for putting more water. So the first thing that we have to do is empty the glass to be able to fill it out again. So we have first to empty our lungs as much as we can, expel as much air as we can until we feel engaging the muscles in our belly. Then the lungs are empty of residual air and we can inhale much easily. So start with the exhalation first and then breathe deep. Just that change can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest mistakes people do. Even they want to start breathing better, but they just do it the reverse.
So just that, breathe out first as much as you can, literally like you are blowing a balloon or trying to blow out all the birthday candles of a cake. And then naturally you are going to inhale.
Wow,
Just that.
So our listeners, two things for sure that you could take away from our conversation today. First of all, we spoke about the pause. And for those people that have said they don't have time to pause, you got to breathe. And if you breathe well, at least that's going to be the pause. Thank you so much for that. So how could people find out more about what you do?
So the best way is my website. That is my name, Anna, just with one N, A-N-A, and my last name, Melikian, Melikian.com. From there, you can see all the other things that I'm doing, including my podcast, Mindset Zone.
Very cool. For the links, resources mentioned in this episode, check out the show notes at www.ptechgroup.com/podcast, where we'll link up to your website and to your podcast. Let's close with the 4 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Okay.
Number 1, a book that changed your life.
Ooh, so many, but Man's Search for Meaning.
Number 2, a piece of advice you got that you'll never forget.
It takes us 3 years to learn how to speak and a lifetime to learn when to stay quiet.
Oh, this is so good. Thank you. Number 3, anything you wish you could go back and do differently.
I'm not one of regrets, but I don't know, egging my dad more and tell him that I love before he had passed away.
Oh, wow. And last and final question, what's still on your bucket list to achieve?
Be more in the present moment and keep walking my talk.
That's cool. The last guest I interviewed said, my bucket list is to live tomorrow. And I like it. It's very similar. So sometimes you have these very huge bucket lists and there's a place for that. And sometimes we just want to be present today or tomorrow and do what we love doing. Anna, thank you so much for joining us. I know your time is valuable. That is why, in the name of our listeners, we'll forever be grateful for sharing some of your time with us today. It's been a blast.
My pleasure.
Thank you.